I wish it was just as easy as eating a bunch of protein and calling it a day. Building muscle, right? It's all you gotta do is just eat more protein than you burn. No, there's actually foods that have higher levels of anabolic properties than other foods. Even in the protein category, one kind of protein might be clinically shown to build more muscle than another kind of protein. And it all comes down to mTOR, which we'll talk about a little bit, but for the gist of it, this video is going to be fairly basic. I'm going to talk about the 5 anabolic foods that you can introduce into your diet to hopefully get you a little bit more protein synthesis and get a little bit more results out of the gym. I have just launched my signature truffles with Thrive Market. So these are low sugar. In fact, they're actually keto friendly. They're sweetened with allulose, utilizing ethically sourced cacao, and also using hazelnut butter to give it a really well-rounded taste. So 2 different flavors. There is a hazelnut pecan crunch, which literally has a crunch to it. It's like velvety smooth, but then when you bite into it, you get the crunch in there as well. And a hazelnut mocha flavor for those that like that little coffee bite to it as well. So these things are completely low carb. There's only a tiny bit of sugar in them to begin with. The primary sweetener is allulose, and everything else is ethically sourced. So I partnered up with Thrive because we've worked on products together, but it was finally time for us to actually create a product that has the DeLauer signature on it. So that link down below saves you 30% off your whole grocery order through Thrive Market, but you're more than welcome to apply that 30% off to these truffles as well, which are priced at $10.99, so they're not too bad to begin with, but then when you apply that 30%, it's even better. Plus, you get a free $60 gift whenever you sign up with Thrive Market as well. So that link is down below in the top line of the description underneath this video. All right, jumping right in. First thing, fatty fish, okay? Salmon, mackerel, sardines, whatever high omega-3 fatty fish you can get your hands on. Okay, it has to do with the omega-3s. Cool study published in the journal Clinical Science showed that when you have omega-3s coming in combination with protein, you have an elevation in what is called the phosphorylated mTOR and also what is called P70S6K. Okay, these were elevated by 50%. What does this mean? This all sounds like Greek. You've probably turned off the video already. Well, no, here's what's going on. Okay, mTOR is the anabolic switch in our body. Okay, again, if we just eat a bunch of protein, but we don't have mTOR turned on, our body the switch isn't flipped to building mode, then that protein isn't doing us much good. That's protein synthesis at its finest. So what this clinical science study shows is that when we add omega-3s, we seem to heighten that mTOR response. We flip the switch on even harder. Okay, so we've gone from a little bit of muscle building mode to 50% more by having the omega-3s. So I would highly recommend, based upon that research, that you have fattier fish as your protein source because it's not created equal with other protein sources. Let's move in to the next one. Essential amino acids, primarily coming from, animal proteins. I know that might upset some people, but there's going to be a solution if you're plant-based too. Look at, okay, we have 21 amino acids that we can choose from. Some of them are essential, which means we need to get them from the diet. And generally speaking, animal proteins are going to be a bit higher in essential amino acids, if not dramatically higher. Well, there's some interesting research that shows that when you take in protein and you have essential amino acids added on top of it, you increase the anabolic ability of that protein. So the Society in Sports Nutrition Journal published just this. They took a look at subjects that consumed whey protein versus whey protein plus 6.4 grams of EAAs, essential amino acids. Guess what the result was? The protein shake with the additional EAAs had 6 times the amount of protein synthesis, just by adding a little bit of those essential amino acids. Now, how you can connect the dots here is generally animal proteins do have more of the way of essential amino acids. That being said, properly formulated plant-based shakes and properly formulated plant-based diets can get those essential amino acids in, or you can get your essential amino acids from supplemental sources. So ultimately, it's add some EAAs whenever possible to your meals, not as a substitute for a meal, but to your meals, or eat well-rounded high EAA foods, okay? Again, we're looking salmon, we're looking almonds, things like that. Next up is going to be leucine. When it comes down to mTOR, leucine is the master. Leucine triggers mTOR like no other, which means it can be good and it can be bad. If you're looking in the world of like cancer cancer and things like that. There's a lot of science that shows maybe you want to avoid leucine because it can trigger mTOR, it can trigger a lot of tumor growth, things like that. I don't think you need to be paying attention to that too much because that's not what we're talking about right now. But when it comes down to muscle protein synthesis and mTOR activation, leucine is the master. Okay, so you want to choose proteins that have high amounts of leucine. Take a look at some of this research. The Journal of Nutrition published this paper that took a look at elderly women, okay? And these elderly women, they divided into two groups. Now, elderly women, of course, you're gonna be combating sarcopenia. You're gonna be combating muscle catabolism to begin with, and anyone that's elderly. But they gave them 25 grams of whey protein or 10 grams of a lower quality milk protein plus 3 grams of pure leucine, okay? So whey protein versus milk protein plus leucine. Then they had them go through a resistance training protocol. Well, at the end of the study, their results were about the same in terms of how much muscle they put on. Now, this may not sound like something that fascinating, but it is to me because whey protein is highly anabolic. Milk protein is not as anabolic. And all they did is add 3 grams of inexpensive leucine. So you can either add leucine to your diet when you're eating food, or again, you can eat proteins that are high in leucine, which again, we come down to salmon, we come down to almonds, we come down to good quality grass-fed beef, also eggs, which are probably one of the best sources of leucine. But one of the things that I would recommend is if you can, get some sprouted almonds and have a couple sprouted almonds along with your protein. That way you're just getting an additional amount of fat, an additional amount of that leucine, and you have a pretty anabolic little combination there. Okay, now let's move into arginine, another amino acid. Arginine's pretty basic, right? We see it in a lot of supplements, we see it in food, of course. But we also notice that arginine, once again, seems to be a strong activator of mTOR. And what's cool is if you look at studies where they have mTOR knockdown mice, okay, mice that have had mTOR removed from their bodies, there's no mTOR at all. They give them arginine, there's no effect. It doesn't do anything, which indicates, once again, that arginine seems to have an effect, whether it's direct or indirect, on mTOR. And if you're getting the common theme of this video, mTOR activation is what we want to build muscle. We want big spikes of mTOR, short amounts of time, so that we can spike and build our muscle. I really have saved the best for last because I think this one is really fascinating. And there's a level of mystery, an element of mystery to this one that's always fascinated me. Okay, back in 1997, they discovered something known as CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. Okay, now CLA comes in supplement form, it comes in food form, but realistically, I would recommend getting it from good quality meat sources. Okay, so grass-fed finished meat, good quality dairy fat. Okay, conjugated linoleic acid is an omega-6, but for whatever strange reason, it seems to cause a pretty rapid increase in muscle mass in a lot of clinical settings. Now, why? There's a couple of different theories. Okay, yes, of course, it has an effect on mTOR, but what's interesting is its effect on testosterone. We see a pretty acute increase in testosterone synthesis after intense workouts when CLA is in the mix. So if CLA is readily available in the body, it's allowing the synthesis of testosterone, which could play a very big role in the recovery of a workout. Right? When it comes down to muscle anabolism, testosterone does play a big role. We have that mTOR piece, which is involved in protein synthesis, but then from sort of the hormonal aspect, we have testosterone involvement. So CLA is just fascinating because the research just continues to unfold. What you don't want to be doing is getting CLA from an inexpensive supplement form where it's artificially derived. You're best off getting naturally occurring CLA because it is an omega-6, which means it does have inflammatory properties if you have too much of it. Okay, the right amount of CLA can actually be an inflammatory mediator. So if we have the right amount coming in, we're in good shape. So point is, get it from food sources, food that's high in CLA, which is going to be, again, grass-fed, grass-finished meat, things like that. So anyhow, if you combine these things and you really exercise the right protocols, utilizing omega-3s from fatty fish, getting your animal proteins or adding EAAs whenever you can, also having leucine-rich foods, getting some extra arginine in and getting that CLA in, I think you've got a pretty good little combination to help you get the most anabolic effect out of your food. I'll see you tomorrow.